In the locked garden of Rosehaven Manor, a gardener lies dead, a knife in his chest, the gate sealed tight. No way in, no way out, or so it seems. Hercule Poirot unravels a web of family secrets, hidden tunnels, and desperate motives. Was it the heir craving wealth, the botanist guarding a secret, or the neighbor fueled by rage? In this deadly puzzle, only Poirot's little grey cells can unearth the truth before the garden claims another victim. Chapter 1. The Walled Enigma. The autumn sun hung low over Ashford village, casting long shadows across the cobbled lane where Hercule Poirot alighted from a rattling taxi. He adjusted his Homburg hat with precision, his gloved fingers brushing a speck of dust from his immaculate black coat. The air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves, mingled with the faint earthy tang of a garden nearby. Before him loomed the high stone walls of Rosehaven Manor, their weathered surfaces draped sparingly with ivy, as if the stone itself resisted adornment. A crowd of villagers huddled beyond a police cordon, their whispers buzzing like bees disturbed from their hive. At the center of the scene stood the iron gate of the manor's walled garden, slightly ajar, its rusted hinges gleaming dully in the pale light. Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of a sleepless night, spotted Poirot and strode over, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Poirot, you old devil, thank heavens you're here," he said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "This one's got us stumped. Clarence Hawthorne, the gardener, found dead in his own walled garden. No doors, no windows, just this gate locked from the inside, key in his pocket. It's a ruddy impossibility." Poirot's moustache quivered, a faint smile playing beneath it. An impossibility, mon ami. To Hercule Poirot, such a word is but an invitation. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, surveyed the scene. The villagers' murmurs grew hushed as they noticed the small, fastidious man with the egg-shaped head, his reputation preceding him like a shadow. Japp led him through the gate into the garden, a sanctuary of meticulous order. Rosebeds formed geometric patterns, their blooms disciplined into submission. A sundial stood at the garden's heart, its bronze face catching the sun's fleeting rays. Hedges, trimmed to razor-edged precision, framed paths of raked gravel, and there, near a bed of chrysanthemums, lay Clarence Hawthorne, his body sprawled in a grotesque parody of repose. A pruning knife protruded from his chest, its handle worn from years of use. His weathered face, framed by a shock of white hair, bore an expression of startled disbelief, as if death had caught him unawares. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. The soil beneath was soft from recent rain, yet only Clarence's heavy boots had left their mark. No other footprints disturbed the earth. Curio Poirot murmured, his fingers hovering over the ground. "The garden, it is like a stage, perfectly set, yet the actor has played his final scene." Japp shifted impatiently. "No signs of a struggle, Poirot. No ladder marks on the walls, no broken ivy. These walls are 10 feet high, smooth as a billiard table. No one could have climbed them without leaving a trace." Poirot rose, brushing his gloves together. "And the gate, it was locked when the body was found." "Bolted tight," Japp confirmed. "The housemaid, Jenny, found him this morning. She's got a key, but she swears she didn't touch it. Says Clarence was fanatical about locking up, never left the garden open, not even for a moment." Poirot's gaze swept the enclosure, noting the wall's unbroken expanse, the gate's sturdy lock, the absence of any ladder or tool that might betray an intruder. A garden so perfect, so sealed, yet a man lies dead within. This, Inspector, is a puzzle that demands the little grey cells. Japp sighed. I've got men questioning the household Clarence's sister-in-law, her son, a botanist lady who visited yesterday, and the neighbour who's always grumbling about the wall. But none of them could have got in here, Poirot. It's like the devil himself did it. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The devil, he is not so clever as to outwit Hercule Poirot. Come, let us meet these players in our little drama. The truth, it hides not in the walls, but in the hearts of those who knew the victim. As they turned to leave the garden, Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on a single chrysanthemum, its petals pristine save for one, slightly bent, as if brushed by an unseen hand. He said nothing, but his mind, like the garden, was already cultivating order from chaos. Chapter 2. The household of Rosehaven, drawing room of Rosehaven Manor, was a study in faded grandeur. Its heavy velvet curtains, drawn against the autumn chill, casting a sombre glow over the polished mahogany furniture. A fire crackled in the grate, its warmth doing little to dispel the tension that hung like a miasma over the assembled company. Hercule Poirot stood near the hearth, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the room's opulence, his green eyes scanning the faces. Before him, with the acuity of a jeweller appraising flawed gems, Inspector Japp, ever the pragmatist, hovered near the door, his notebook open, his pencil poised like a weapon. The suspects sat in a semicircle, each isolated in their own unease. Mrs. Eleanor Hawthorne, Clarence's widowed sister-in-law, occupied a backed chair, her posture rigid as if carved from the same oak as the room's panelling. Her black dress, severe and unadorned, seemed to absorb the light, and her pale hands were clasped tightly in her lap, betraying a flicker of nerves beneath her icy composure. Her son, Rupert Hawthorne, lounged on a sofa, his lanky frame sprawled, with a studied nonchalance that failed to mask his agitation. He toyed with an unlit cigarette, rolling it between his fingers as if it might yield answers. Miss Clara Vance, the botanist, sat apart, her tweed skirt and ink-stained blouse marking her as an outsider in this world of inherited wealth. Her sharp eyes darted between her companions, and a notebook rested on her knee, its pages filled with sketches of plants. Lastly, Mr. Thomas Grieve, the neighbour, perched on the edge of an armchair, his florid face set in a scowl, his thick hands gripping the armrests as if anchoring himself against an accusation. Poirot stepped forward, his polished shoes silent. On the Abusin rug, he bowed, a gesture both courteous and commanding. Madame et messieurs, he began, his voice soft yet resonant, I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to unravel the mystery of Monsieur Clarence Hawthorne's death. A man has been taken from us, in a garden locked as tightly as a vault, and yet the truth, it is never so well concealed that it cannot be found. I ask you now to speak, to tell me of your movements yesterday, for in the smallest detail the truth may hide. A silence followed, heavy as the air before a storm. Eleanor Hawthorne lifted her chin, her grey eyes meeting Poirot's, with a defiance that bordered on disdain. I am Eleanor Hawthorne, she said, her voice low and measured, widow of Clarence's brother, Edward. This manor is my home, though Clarence treated it as his own, fussing over that wretched garden as if it were his child. Yesterday, I was in the library from breakfast until well past noon, reading. I saw no one, heard nothing unusual. Clarence kept to himself, as always. Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching slightly. The library, madame. It overlooks the garden, Nan. You heard no cry, No sound of a struggle. None, she replied sharply. The walls are thick, and Clarence was not a man given to outbursts. He was methodical, obsessed, even obsessed, Poirot repeated, savouring the word. And this obsession, it caused friction, perhaps. Elinor's lips tightened. He spent more on those flowers than on the upkeep of this house. But that is hardly a motive for murder. Poirot's gaze shifted to Rupert, who had lit his cigarette and was exhaling a plume of smoke, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. And you, Monsieur Rupert, you are the heir to Rosehaven, I understand. Where were you when your uncle met his end? Rupert's hand paused, the cigarette hovering near his lips. He flashed a lopsided grin, but it faltered under Poirot's scrutiny. In London, old chap. Had a meeting with my solicitor about some investments, left early, caught the 8 o'clock train. Didn't get back until the evening. Mother telephoned me at my club around noon, so she can confirm I was there. Poirot's eyebrows rose fractionally. A solicitor, you say? And this meeting, it was urgent. Rupert shrugged, his nonchalance strained. Just business, nothing to do with Uncle Clarence and his blasted roses. Poirot made a small, non-committal sound, his eyes flickering to Elinor, who nodded curtly. I called Rupert at the Reform Club. Hughes in London, as he says. Most convenient, Poirot murmured, almost to himself. He turned to Clara Vance, who had been watching the exchange with the alertness of a fox. Mademoiselle Vance, you are a botanist. You came to Rosehaven for the garden, I presume. Clara straightened, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook. Yes, Mr. Poirot. Clarence Hawthorne was renowned for his orchid hybrids, rare specimens, some unique to this garden. I've been studying them for months, with his permission. Yesterday, I arrived at 10 to examine a new bloom in the greenhouse. Clarence let me in through the gate, and I left at 11. He locked it behind me, as always. Poirot's gaze lingered. On her hands, the faint green stains on her fingers, suggesting more than mere ink. You were alone with him in the garden for an hour. Did you speak? Argue, perhaps? Clara's cheeks flushed, but her voice remained steady. We discussed the orchids. He was difficult, sometimes, protective of his work. He thought I might share his hybrids with the Botanical Society, which I never would, but there was no argument, not really. I left him alive, Mr. Poirot, alive, and locking the gate. Poirot said softly, You saw no one else near the garden, no one watching. No one, she said, her eyes meeting his briefly before dropping to her notebook. Poirot turned to Thomas Grieve, whose scowl had deepened. Monsieur Grieve, you live beside this manor, Nan. You have no love for its walls, I think. Grieve snorted, his voice rough as gravel. Damned right I don't. That wall of Clarence's blocks the sun from my roses best in the county, till he built that fortress. I was home all morning, tending my own garden. Didn't see a thing, didn't hear a thing. And no, I didn't climb his precious wall to stick a knife in him. Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. Your garden, it is close to the manor's wall. You heard nothing at all. A shout, perhaps, or the sound of the gate. Nothing, Grieve repeated, his tone belligerent. I keep to myself, and I suggest you do the same. Poirot inclined, his head unperturbed. Mercy, monsieur. Your candour is noted. He stepped back, clasping his hands behind him, and addressed the room. You have given me your stories, and now I must test them against the truth. A man is dead, locked in his sanctuary, And yet one of you, or perhaps another, knows more than they say. I shall inspect this garden myself, and then, mes amis, we shall see what secrets it yields." As Japp ushered the group out, Poirot lingered, his eyes sweeping the room. The firelight caught a portrait above the mantel, a stern-faced man, presumably Edward Hawthorne, his resemblance to Rupert striking in the set of the jaw, the narrow eyes. Beside it hung a smaller painting, faded and cracked, of the garden in its prime, its colours vibrant even in age. Something about it nagged at Poirot, though he could not yet say what. He descended the manor's stone steps to the garden gate, where Japp awaited. "What do you make of them, Poirot?" the inspector asked, his voice low. "Eleanor's cold as ice, Rupert's too slick by half, Clara's hiding something, and Greaves got a temper that could crack stone." Poirot's moustache twitched. "They are a tableau, mon ami, each playing their part. But the truth, it is not in their words alone. The garden, it will speak more plainly." They entered the garden, the gate creaking shut behind them. The air was heavier here, thick with the scent of damp earth and fading blooms. Poirot's eyes roamed over the precise rows of roses, the clipped hedges, the sundial's shadow stretching long across the gravel. He paused by Clarence's body, now covered with a tarp, and knelt again, his gloved fingers brushing the soil. The chrysanthemum bed was pristine, save for that single bent petal he had noticed earlier. He plucked it, carefully, holding it to the light. "This petal, it is not from these flowers," he said, almost to himself. "It is an orchid, I think. From the greenhouse, perhaps." Japp frowned. "Orchid? How'd it get out here then?" "Clarence wasn't tending orchids when he died." "Precisement," Poirot said, pocketing the petal. "It is a clue, Inspector." A whisper from the garden itself. They moved to the greenhouse, a glass structure glinting at the garden's far end. Inside, the air was humid, thick with the perfume of exotic blooms. Orchids lined the shelves, their delicate petals trembling in the faint breeze from an open vent. Poirot examined the floor, the tools, the neatly stacked pots. Everything was in order, yet to perfect, as if staged. He tapped his cane against the floor, the sound echoing faintly. "This place, it is like a theatre," he murmured. "But where is the trapdoor?" Japp blinked. "Trapdoor, you're seeing things now." "Poirot, perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But the little grey cells, they see what the eyes do not." They returned to the manor, where the butler, Mr. Perkins, awaited with a tray of tea. He was a stooped man, his face lined with years of discreet service, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Poirot accepted a cup, his movements deliberate. "Monsieur Perkins, you served Monsieur Clarence for many years, Nan?" "He was a man of habits, I think." Perkins nodded, his voice soft but clear. 30 years, sir. Mr. Clarence was particularly loved that garden more than anything. Never left the gate unlocked, not even for a moment. But lately he was troubled. Poirot's tone was gentle, coaxing. "In what way?" Perkins hesitated, glancing toward the drawing-room. "He spoke of old sins, sir, things from the past, before my time. Said the garden held secrets, but he wouldn't say more. I thought it just his age, you Norumblings." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Secrets, you say? And did he mention anyone? A name, perhaps?" "No, sir," Perkins said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But he looked at that old painting of the garden sometimes, like it held answers." Poirot set down his cup, his mind racing. "Mercy, Monsieur Perkins. You have been most helpful." As the butler retreated, Japp leaned in. "Old sins, secrets. Sounds like a load of rot to me, Poirot. Clarence was just an old gardener with too much time on his hands." Poirot smiled faintly. "The past, mon ami, it is never so far away as we think. Come, we shall dine with the Hawthorns tonight, and I shall observe these players more closely. The truth, it is like a seed, it lies dormant, but it will grow." That evening, the dining room was a stage of its own, the long table set with silver and crystal that gleamed under the chandelier. Eleanor presided with glacial calm, her conversation limited to curt remarks about the meal. Rupert, now in a tailored suit, made brittle attempts at charm, his eyes darting to Poirot as if gauging his scrutiny. Clara ate sparingly, her attention on a small notebook, where she jotted occasional notes, her fingers still stained with green. Grieve, invited to join them, glowered over his wine, muttering about the manor's upkeep. Poirot, sipping his soup, with fastidious care, steered the conversation to the garden. Monsieur Hawthorne's work, it was extraordinary, Nan. Such order, such precision. Did he ever speak of its history? Eleanor's spoon paused. It was Edward's passion first, before Clarence took it over. They built it together years ago when the manor was thriving. Clarence kept it as a kind of shrine. Rupert snorted. Shrine. More like a money pit. Do you know what those orchids cost? We could have sold the place years ago if he hadn't been so stubborn. Poirot's eyes flickered to him. To sell Rosehaven, it would bring a fine sum, I imagine. And you, monsieur, you would benefit, Nan. Rupert's face reddened. What are you implying? I was in London, I told you. Indeed, Poirot said smoothly. And yet, the garden, it holds the key to this tragedy. Tell me, Mademoiselle Vance, these orchids, were they truly so unique? Clara's fork clattered against her plate. Unique in England, perhaps the world. Clarence was a genius, but he guarded them jealously. He thought everyone wanted to steal his work. And you, mademoiselle, you did not wish to share his secrets with your society. Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. Never, she said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. I respected his wishes. Grieve slammed his glass down. This is nonsense. You're all dancing around it. Clarence was a miserly old fool, and someone finally had enough. I say, good riddance. Eleanor's eyes flashed. Mr. Grieve, you forget yourself. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough, Mies, Amos. The garden will speak, and I shall listen. Tomorrow I return to its secrets. As the meal ended, Poirot lingered, watching the suspects disperse. Eleanor's composure was a mask, Rupert's bravado a shield, Clara's reserve a wall, and Grieve's anger a fire that might burn too brightly. The painting of the garden haunted him, its colors too vivid, its lines too deliberate. Somewhere in its brushstrokes or in the soil of Rosehaven lay the truth, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until he had unearthed it. Chapter 3. The Impenetrable Fortress. The morning mist clung to the stones of Rosehaven Manor, shrouding the walled garden in a veil of silver that seemed to guard its secrets as fiercely as the iron gate. Hercule Poirot, clad in a meticulously tailored overcoat, stood at the garden's threshold, his cane tapping lightly against the gravel path. The air was sharp with the scent of wet earth and fading roses, and the silence was broken only by the distant caw of a rook. Inspector Japp, his collar turned up against the chill, joined him, his face a map of frustration etched by sleepless nights. Poirot, I hope you've got something up your sleeve, Jap said, his breath visible in the cold. My men have combed this place top to bottom, nothing but flowers and dirt. No ladders, no ropes, no sign of anyone scaling the walls. It's as if Clarence Hawthorne was struck down by a ghost. Poirot's moustache curled slightly, a glimmer of amusement in his green eyes. A ghost, mon ami, Nan, the hand that wielded. The knife was flesh and blood, and it left its mark, however faint. Let us examine this fortress, and we shall see what it conceals. The garden was a perfect square, its high walls of weathered limestone rising 10 feet, their surfaces smooth, and unmarred by cracks or footholds. Sparse tendrils of ivy clung to the stone, too frail to bear a climber's weight. The single iron gate, its bars thick and unyielding, was secured with a heavy lock, its mechanism old but robust. Jap produced the key, found in pocket, and turned it with a grating clank. The gate swung open, revealing the garden's interior, a masterpiece of order that seemed to mock the chaos of murder. Poirot stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. The flower beds were laid out in geometric patterns, roses and chrysanthemums arranged with military discipline. A gravel path, raked to perfection, wound toward the sundial at the center, its bronze face glinting dully under the overcast sky. Hedges, trimmed to razor-edged precision, framed the paths. And at the garden's far end stood a small greenhouse, its glass panels misted with condensation. Clarence's body had been removed, but the spot near the chrysanthemum bed where he had fallen was marked by a faint disturbance in the soil, the only blemish in the garden's pristine tableau. Poirot knelt by the chrysanthemums, his gloved fingers brushing the earth. The soil was soft, still damp from the previous day's rain, yet only Clarence's boot prints remained, etched clearly in the mud. No other footprints, Poirot murmured, his voice low. The murderer, he was careful, or perhaps the garden itself conspires to hide him. Jap snorted, careful or invisible. I'm telling you, Poirot, no one could have got in here without leaving a trace. We've checked the walls smooth as glass, not a scratch, and the gate was locked tight when the housemaid found him. Poirot rose, his gaze fixed on the chrysanthemum bed. A single petal, noticed the previous day, lay crushed among the blooms, its delicate white edge marred by a faint smear of dirt. He plucked it carefully, holding it to the light. This petal, Inspector, it is not from these chrysanthemums. It is an orchid, I am certain, from the greenhouse. How does it come to be here, so far from its home? Jap frowned, peering at the petal. Carried by the wind, maybe, or Clarence had it in his pocket. Poirot shook his head. The wind, it does not blow so precisely, and Clarence's pockets contained only the key and a handkerchief. This petal, it is a clue, a breadcrumb left by the careless hand of fate. They moved toward the greenhouse, its glass walls shimmering faintly in the mist. Inside, the air was thick with humidity, the scent of exotic blooms heavy and cloying. Shelves lined with orchids greeted them, their petals ranging from ghostly white to deep violet, each labelled with Clarence's meticulous handwriting. Examined the shelves, noting the orderly arrangement of pots, the polished tools, the faint smell of fertilizer lingering in the air. Everything was in its place, yet the perfection nagged at him, as if the greenhouse were a stage set for a play, yet to be performed. He tapped his cane against the wooden floor, the sound echoing softly. This place, it is too perfect, he said, almost to himself. The murderer, he leaves no trace, yet the garden whispers of his presence. Jap scratched his head. You're talking in riddles again, Poirot. What's the greenhouse got to do with it? Poirot did not answer immediately, his eyes scanning the floor. A faint scuff mark, barely visible near a stack of clay pots, caught his attention. He knelt, his fingers brushing the wood. The mark was slight, a mere disturbance in the dust, but it suggested movement, perhaps hurried. He moved the pots aside, revealing nothing but the bare floor beneath. "Curio," he murmured, "something is here, yet it hides from me." Japp sighed. "You see clues where I see dirt, Poirot. My men found nothing in here, no blood, no footprints, no sign of a struggle, just flowers and more flowers." Poirot stood, brushing his gloves together. The absence of evidence, man army, is itself evidence. The murderer, he is clever, but not so clever as Hercule Poirot. Come, let us walk the perimeter once more. They circled the garden, Poirot's eyes darting from the walls to the ground, seeking any anomaly. The ivy, sparse and brittle, offered no purchase for a climber. The walls, as Japp had said, were smooth, their stones fitted so tightly that not even a knife blade could find a hold. At the gate, Poirot examined the lock again, its mechanism stiff but intact. "This lock, it has not been tampered with," he said. The key was in Clarence's pocket, yet the gate was locked when he was found. How then does the murderer enter and leave? Japp shrugged. "That's the question, isn't it? Maybe Clarence locked himself in and then keeled over, but that doesn't explain the knife in his chest." Poirot's smile was faint. "Nan, the knife, it is no accident. It is a message, Inspector, written in blood. But to whom and why?" As they stepped back onto the gravel path, a figure approached from the manor, a young woman in a housemaid's uniform, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. Jenny, the maid who had discovered the body, clutched a shawl around her shoulders. "Mr. Poirot, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "Inspector Japp said you wanted to speak with me." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle Jenny, you have my thanks. You found Monsieur Hawthorne this morning. Tell me, exactly what did you see?" Jenny swallowed, her hands twisting the shawl. "I came to the garden at 8, sir, like always, to bring Mr. Clarence his tea. He liked to start early, tending the roses. The gate was locked, so I used my Keitha spare he kept in the house. When I went in, I saw him, lying there, by the chrysanthemums, with that knife in him. I screamed, sir, and ran to fetch Mr. Perkins. I didn't touch anything, I swear." Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were precise. "The gate, it was locked when you arrived. You were certain?" "Yes, sir," she said, nodding vigorously. "I had to turn the key twice. It sticks sometimes. Mr. Clarence was particular about locking it, always said no one was to come in without him knowing. And you saw no one else? No stranger near the garden?" "No, sir, just Mr. Clarence. All alone, dead." Her voice broke, and she dabbed her eyes with the shawl. Poirot patted her arm gently. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. Go now and rest." As Jenny hurried back to the manor, Japp shook his head. "Poor girl's shaken up. But her story checks out. The lock wasn't forced, and she's got no reason to lie." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No reason we know of, mon ami. But the truth, it is like the roots of these roses hidden beneath the surface, yet vital to the whole." They lingered in the garden, the mist beginning to lift as the sun broke through. Poirot paced slowly, his cane marking a steady rhythm. He paused by the sundial, its shadow now sharp against the gravel. This garden, It is a puzzle, he said. It presents itself as impenetrable, yet a man is dead within. The answer, it lies not in what we see, but in what we do not. Japp groaned. You're going to drive me to an early grave with this talk, Poirot. Give me something solid, footprints, a weapon, a witness. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience, Inspector. The garden, it will speak, but in its own time. For now, we return to the manor. I must think, and the little grey cells, they require order to work their magic. As they left the garden, Poirot cast a final glance at the chrysanthemum bed, the crushed orchid petal now safe in his pocket. The garden was silent, its blooms serene, but to Poirot it whispered of secrets yet to be unearthed, and he would not rest until he had heard its full confession. Chapter 4. The family's shadow, the dining room of Rosehaven Manor, glowed under the soft light of a crystal chandelier, its facets casting prismatic glints across the polished table. Hercule Poirot sat at one end, his posture impeccable, his small hands folded neatly as he observed the assembled company with the keenness of a hawk. The air was heavy with the scent of roasted pheasant and the undercurrent of unease that permeated the household. Inspector Japp, seated beside him, fidgeted with his napkin, his blunt features set in a frown as he surveyed the suspects. The meal was a formality, a stage for Poirot to probe the cracks in the Hawthorns' carefully maintained facade. Eleanor Hawthorne presided over the table with the dignity of a dowager queen, her black silk dress absorbing the light, her grey eyes cold and unyielding. Her son Rupert slouched in his chair, his tailored suit unable to mask the nervous energy that made his fingers drum against the tablecloth. Clara Vance, the botanist, sat with her hands clasped around a glass of water, her plain tweed skirt, an ink-stained blouse, a stark contrast to the room's opulence. Thomas Grieve, the neighbour, had been persuaded to join them, his florid face flushed from wine, his scowl deepening with every passing moment. Poirot sipped his claret, his movements deliberate, and broke the silence with a voice soft yet commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, we dine together, yet a shadow hangs over this table. Monsieur Clarence Hawthorne is dead, and the truth, it lies among you. Let us speak of him, of his life, his passions. Perhaps, in doing so, we uncover what led to his end. Eleanor's fork paused mid-air, her lips tightening. Clarence was a gardener, Mr. Poirot, nothing more. He lived for his plants, his roses, his orchids. He was a recluse, content to toil in that garden from dawn to dusk. I saw little of him, save when he joined us for meals, and even then he spoke only of soil and seasons. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A recluse, madame, yet he permitted Mademoiselle Vance to enter his sanctuary. That suggests trust, Nan. Clara flushed, her fingers tightening round her glass. He allowed me to study his orchids because I respected his work. He knew I wouldn't betray his secrets to the Botanical Society. Rupert snorted, tossing his napkin onto the table. Secrets. The only secret was how much money he poured into that garden. Do you know what those orchids cost? Thousands. Mr. Poirot, thousands that could have kept this house from crumbling. He was a burden, plain and simple. He caught himself, his face reddening. I don't mean I wanted him dead, of course. Poirot's moustache twitched. Of course, Monsieur Rupert. And yet, with your uncle gone, the estate, it passes to you, does it not? A burden lifted, perhaps. Rupert's eyes narrowed, but Eleanor interjected, her voice sharp as a blade. My son was in London, Mr. Poirot, as he told you. I telephoned him at his club at noon. He could not have been here when Clarence died. Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. A most convenient alibi, Madame. The train, it is swift, but a motor car, it is swifter still. Tell me, Monsieur Rupert, this meeting with your solicitor, what was its purpose? Rupert shifted, his bravado faltering. Just business, investments, that sort of thing. Nothing to do with Uncle Clarence. Indeed, Poirot said softly, his gaze lingering. He turned to Grieve, who was glowering over his plate. Monsieur Grieve, you live beside this garden. That so consumed Monsieur Hawthorne. Did you ever speak with him of its upkeep, its cost? Grieve's laugh was harsh, like gravel underfoot. Speak with him. The man barely grunted at me. That wall of his ruined my roses, blocked the sun. Turned my garden into a swamp. I told him to tear it down, but he wouldn't hear of it. Obstinate old fool. Poirot's fingers tapped his glass lightly. And yet you did not seek to persuade him more forcefully. Grieve's face darkened. If you're asking if I killed him, the answer's no. I was in my garden all morning. Ask anyone in the village. I've no patience for this nonsense. Poirot smiled thinly. Patience, monsieur, is a virtue I cultivate. We shall see what the village says. As the meal progressed, Poirot steered the conversation to the manor's history, probing for cracks in the family story. Eleanor spoke of her late husband, Edward, with a reverence that bordered on ritual. He and Clarence built the garden. Together, she said, her voice softening. It was their pride, a legacy for Rosehaven. After Edward's death, Clarence took it upon himself to maintain it, as if it were Edward's memory. Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands as she spoke of Edward. A legacy, madame. Yet legacies, they can be a burden as well as a blessing. Was there ever talk of selling the estate? Eleanor's eyes flashed. Never. This is our home, Mr. Poirot. Clarence would sooner have died than see it sold. Rupert muttered under his breath. He got his wish, didn't he? The room fell silent, the words hanging like a guillotine. Clara broke the tension, her voice quiet but firm. Clarence loved the garden more than anything. He told me once. It was his sanctuary, a place where the past couldn't touch him. Poirot's head tilted. The past, mademoiselle. Did he speak of it often? Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering to Eleanor. Not often, but sometimes. He mentioned old mistakes, things he regretted. I thought he meant his brother's death, but he never explained. Poirot filed the comment away, his mind turning, like the gears of a clock. After dinner, as the others retired, he sought out Mr. Perkins, the butler, who was clearing the table with the silent efficiency of long service. The man's lined face and sharp eyes suggested a knowledge of the household's undercurrents, and Poirot approached him with the tact of a diplomat. Monsieur Perkins, he began, his voice low, you have served the Hawthorns for many years. You knew Monsieur Clarence well. Tell me, was he always so troubled, as Mademoiselle Vance suggests? Perkins paused, a silver tray balanced in his hands. Mr. Clarence was a private man, sir, but yes, these last months, he seemed different. He'd sit in the garden at night, staring at the sundial, muttering about old sins and hidden paths. I thought it was just his age, or the strain of keeping the estate afloat. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Hidden paths, you say? In the garden, Perkins nodded, his expression uneasy. He never explained, sir, just ramblings, I thought. But he'd look at that old painting in the drawing room, the one of the garden, like it held something he couldn't forget. Poirot interest quickened. "This painting, it is significant." "I couldn't say, sir," Perkins replied, his voice cautious. "It's been there since Mr. Edward's time, painted when the garden was new. Mr. Clarence would stand before it sometimes, just staring." Poirot thanked the butler and made his way to the drawing-room, where the fire had dwindled to embers. The painting hung above the mantel, its colours faded but vibrant in memory, a depiction of the garden in its youth, with roses in full bloom and the sundial gleaming. The walls were lower in the painting, the ivy thicker, and something about the perspective tugged at Poirot's mind, though he could not yet name it. He stood for a long moment, his hands clasped behind him, his little grey cells stirring, hidden. "Paths," he murmured. "The garden, it keeps its secrets, but not from Hercule Poirot." As he left the room, the manor seemed to close around him, its shadows deeper, its silence more oppressive. The family's story was a tapestry woven with half-truths and concealed motives, and Poirot knew that somewhere in the threads of their words or the soil of the garden lay the key to Clarence's death. He would return to the garden at dawn, armed not with tools but with the relentless logic that had never failed him. Chapter 5. The botanist's motive. The library of Rosehaven Manor was a sanctuary of leather-bound volumes and polished oak, its tall windows admitting the pale light of a late autumn morning. Hercule Poirot stood near a bookcase, his gloved fingers tracing the spine of a botanical treatise, his green eyes fixed on Clara Vance, who sat at a writing desk, her pen scratching furiously over a notebook filled with intricate sketches of orchids. The air carried the faint must of old paper and the sharper tang of ink, a fitting backdrop for a woman whose passion for plants seemed to rival the late Clarence Hawthorne's. Inspector Japp had withdrawn to question the village gossips, leaving Poirot to probe the botanist's story alone, a task he approached with the precision of a surgeon. Clara glanced up as Poirot approached, her sharp features tightening, though she quickly masked her unease with a polite smile. "Mr. Poirot, I didn't expect to see you here. Are you interested in botany?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile courteous but probing. "Mademoiselle Vance, I am interested in all things that reveal the truth. Your sketches, they are exquisite, such detail, such passion. You shared this passion with Monsieur Hawthorne, Nan." Clara set down her pen, her hands folding over the notebook as if to shield it. "Clarence was a genius with orchids," she said, her voice steady but tinged with something Poirot could not yet name, pride, perhaps, or defensiveness. "His hybrids were unlike anything I've seen, even in the great conservatories of Kew. I came to Rosehaven to study them, to learn. From him he allowed me access to the greenhouse, though he was particular about who entered his garden." Poirot nodded, seating himself opposite her, his small frame composed yet commanding. "Particular, you say? Yet he trusted you, mademoiselle, to enter his sanctuary. That suggests a bond, perhaps more than professional." Clara's cheeks flushed, a faint pink against her pale skin. "If you're implying anything improper, Mr. Poirot, you're mistaken. Our bond was intellectual, nothing more. Clarence respected my work, though he didn't always agree with my methods." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the slight tremor in her voice. "Methods, mademoiselle. Tell me, what methods might cause disagreement between two such dedicated scholars of the plant world?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the green stains on her hands, a mark of her trade. Clarence was secretive, almost paranoid. He believed the Botanical Society wanted to steal his hybrids, to claim credit for his work. I told him, sharing. His findings would advance science, but he refused. We had words about it that morning, before I left the garden. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. Words, mademoiselle. An argument, perhaps. You were alone with him in the garden from 10 to 11. What passed between you? Clara's eyes flickered, meeting his briefly before dropping to her notebook. It wasn't an argument, not really. He accused me of taking cuttings without permission, which was absurd. I'd never betray his trust like that. I tried to reason with him, to explain that his orchids could benefit others, but he grew angry, told me to leave. So I did, at 11, and he locked the gate behind me. That was the last I saw of him alive. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of his chair, a rhythm that matched the ticking of the library's grandfather clock. And you saw no one else near the garden? No one watching from the manor, or perhaps from the neighbour's side? No one, she said quickly, her voice firm but her hands betraying a slight tremble as they smoothed the pages of her notebook. The garden was quiet, as always. Clarence preferred it that way. Poirot's gaze lingered on her hands, the green stains mingling with ink, a silent testament to her hours among plants. Curio, he murmured. You are a woman of science, mademoiselle, yet you protect this man's secrets even in death. Why? Clara's lips parted, then closed, her expression guarded. I respected him, Mr. Poirot. He was difficult, yes, but brilliant. His death is a loss to botany, and I'd rather his work be remembered than his quarrels. Poirot inclined his head, his smile enigmatic, a noble sentiment. Yet brilliance, it can inspire envy, Nan, or perhaps greed. Tell me, did Monsieur Hawthorne ever speak of his family, of their plans for the estate? Clara's brow furrowed, as if the question caught her off guard. Not much. He mentioned Rupert once or twice, said the boy was impatient, always talking of selling the manor. Clarence hated the idea, said the garden was his brother's legacy, and he'd die before letting it go. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He said, this, he would die. Most interesting. And Madame Eleanor, did he speak of her? Rarely, Clara admitted. He said she was cold, kept to herself after her husband died. I think he felt she resented his presence, but he never explained why. Poirot rose, his movements fluid, and paced slowly to the window, where the garden lay shrouded in mist beyond the glass. Mercy, Mademoiselle Vance, you have given me much to consider. The garden, it holds the key to this tragedy, and your words, they are like petals scattered on the path. Clara's smile was tight, her eyes wary. I hope you find the truth, Mr. Poirot. Clarence deserved better than this. As she returned to her sketching, Poirot stepped into the hall, his mind a whirl of impressions. Clara's story was plausible, yet her quickness to defend Clarence, her hesitation when pressed, suggested a depth to their relationship she was reluctant to reveal. Was it loyalty to a mentor, or something more calculated? The green stains on her hands, the crushed orchid petal in the garden's small details. But to Poirot, they were threads in a tapestry yet to be woven. He descended to the drawing room, where the painting of the garden caught his eye once more. Its colours, though faded, depicted a younger Rosehaven, the walls lower, the ivy denser, the sundial gleaming as if newly cast. Something about the painting nagged at him, a discrepancy he could not yet name. He made a mental note to examine it further, for the past, as the butler had hinted, might hold the key to the present. Outside, the mist had thickened, cloaking the garden in secrecy. Poirot donned his coat and hat, determined to revisit the greenhouse where the orchid petal had originated. As he stepped into the chill air, he felt the weight of the manor's history pressing upon him, its shadows whispering of old sins and hidden truths. Clara Vance, with her stained hands and guarded words, was a piece of the puzzle, but whether she was a pawn or a player, only the garden could reveal. Chapter 6. The neighbours grudged. The late afternoon sun cast a feeble glow over Ashford village, its rays struggling to pierce the gathering clouds that hung low above Rosehaven Manor. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, walked the short distance from the manor to the neighbouring cottage of Thomas Grieve, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the uneven path. The air was heavy with the promise of rain, and the scent of damp hedgerows mingled with the faint bitterness of woods. Inspector Japp had remained at the manor, coordinating with his constables to verify alibis, leaving Poirot to pursue the thread of suspicion that led to the florid-faced neighbour, whose enmity toward Clarence Hawthorne was as palpable as the chill in the air. Grieve's cottage was a sturdy affair of red brick, its garden a riot of roses that, despite their beauty, seemed to sulk in the shadow of Rosehaven's towering wall. The man himself was at work among his blooms, a pair of pruning shears in his calloused hands, his broad shoulders hunched as he snipped at a thorny stem with more force than necessary. His face, reddened by sun and temper, turned toward Poirot as he approached, and his eyes narrowed into slits of suspicion. "Mr. Grieve," Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished marble, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek to understand the tragedy that has befallen your neighbour, Monsieur Clarence Hawthorne. May I have a moment of your time?" Grieve straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with a rough sleeve. "I've said all I need to your inspector friend," he growled, his voice thick with the burr of the countryside. "I was here, in my garden, all morning. Didn't see nothing, didn't hear nothing, and I didn't kill the old fool, if that's what you're sniffing about." Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile disarming yet piercing. "Mon ami, I sniff only for the truth, and it is a scent that leads me to you. You had no love for Monsieur Hawthorne, I think. This wall," he gestured toward the towering limestone barrier that loomed between the properties, "it is a source of contention, Nan." Grieve's scowl deepened, and he jabbed his shears toward the wall. "Contention, that's putting it mildly. That blasted wall blocks the sun, starves my roses. I've got the best blooms in the county, or I did, till Clarence built his fortress. I begged him to lower it, even offered to pay for it, but he wouldn't budge. Said it was his brother's design, sacred or some such rot. Stubborn as a mule. He was." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the heat in Grieve's words. "And this stubbornness, it made you angry, perhaps. Angry enough to take matters into your own hands." Grieve's face flushed a deeper shade of crimson, and he took a step forward, the shears glinting in his grip. "Now, see here, you little foreigner, I'm no murderer. I was in my garden from dawn till noon, tending my plants. Ask Mrs. Tuttle across the lane. She saw me out here, fussing with my roses. I've no patience for Clarence's nonsense, but I didn't stick a knife in him." Poirot raised a placating hand, his expression unruffled. "Calm, monsieur. I do not accuse, I inquire. Your garden, it is close to the manor's wall. You heard nothing unusual that morning? A shout, perhaps, or the clang of the gate?" Grieve snorted, tossing the shears onto a nearby bench. "Nothing but birds and the wind. That garden of his was quiet as a tomb always was. Clarence didn't like noise, didn't like company, kept that gate locked tighter than a bank vault. Poirot's gaze drifted to the wall, its smooth surface unbroken save for the sparse ivy that clung to its base. And you never sought to explore this garden, to see its wonders for yourself. Grieve laughed, a harsh barking sound. Explore. Why would I? His roses were no better than mine, and his orchids were just a rich man's fancy. I've got my own patch to tend, and it's enough for me. Poirot's eyes flickered to a wooden shed at the edge of Grieve's garden, where a ladder leaned against its weathered planks. It was sturdy but short, no more than 6 feet, insufficient to scale the manor's 10-foot wall. Still, its presence piqued his curiosity. This ladder, monsieur, you use it often. Grieve followed his gaze, his expression wary. For pruning the taller bushes, yes. What of it? You think I hauled it over that wall? It's too short, and I'm not fool enough to try. Poirot nodded, his smile enigmatic. Of course, monsieur. But the mind, it wonders. Tell me, did you ever see others near the garden? Mademoiselle Vance, perhaps, or Monsieur Rupert? Grieve shrugged, his anger subsiding into grudging cooperation. Clara Vance was always poking about, coming and going with her notebooks. Rupert, I saw less often. He's a city type, always off to London. But neither of them was about that morning, far as I know. Poirot's fingers tapped his cane, a rhythm that matched the pulse of his thoughts. And Madame Eleanor, did she ever speak of the garden or of her brother-in-law? Eleanor, Grieve's lip curled. Cold as winter, that one, keeps to the manor, barely nods at neighbours. I reckon she didn't much care for Clarence, but she's too proper to say so. If you're looking for motive, you'd do better to ask her about the estate's debts than to bother me. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. Debts, monsieur? You know of such matters. Grieve smirked, enjoying a moment of superiority. Village talk, Mr. Poirot. Everyone knows Rosehaven's been bleeding money for years. Clarence's, flowers. Didn't help. Word is Rupert's keen to sell, but Clarence wouldn't hear of it. Now he's gone, I'd wager the manor's days are numbered. Poirot filed the information away, his mind turning over the implications. Mercy, Monsieur Grieve, you have been most illuminating. I shall trouble you no further for now. As he turned to leave, Poirot's eyes lingered on the ladder, its worn rungs suggesting frequent use. It was too short for the wall, true, but the garden's secrets were not limited to its heights. He made his way back to the manor, the clouds overhead thickening, casting the landscape in a sombre grey. The wall loomed behind him, a silent sentinel, and he felt its presence like a challenge to his little grey cells. Back at Rosehaven, he found Jap in the drawing-room, his notebook filled with scrawled notes from his village inquiries. Any luck, Poirot? The inspector asked, his tone hopeful but weary. Poirot removed his hat, smoothing its brim with care. Luck, mon ami, is for those without method. Monsieur Grieve is a man of passion and resentment, but his alibi it holds for now. The village, what does it say? Jap flipped through his notes. Mrs. Tuttle, Grieve's neighbour, confirms he was in his garden all morning, pruning and muttering. A few others saw him too. Clara Vance was spotted leaving the manor at 11, heading to the village post office. Rupert's train tickets check out he was in London, and Eleanor's call to his club confirms it. We're no closer to cracking this, Poirot. Poirot's smile was faint, almost secretive. Patience. Inspector, the truth, it is like a rosette blooms in its own time. Monsieur Grieve speaks of debts, of Rupert's desire to sell. This motive, it grows clearer, but the means, they remain hidden. Japp groaned. Debts and roses don't explain a locked garden and a knife in the chest. What's next, then? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Next, mon ami, I return to the garden. The orchid, petal, the wall, the silence they speak, if one listens. And Hercule Poirot, he listens very well. As he stepped toward the door, the painting of the garden caught his eye once more, its faded colors whispering of a time when the walls were lower, the secrets younger. Grieve's anger, Rupert's impatience, Clara's loyalty, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the garden itself held the key, and Poirot would not rest until he had turned it. Chapter 7. The crushed petal, the twilight-draped Rosehaven Manor in a mantle of shadows. The last rays of the sun painting the walled garden's limestone barrier in hues of amber and grey. Hercule Poirot stood once more within the gardens confines, his immaculate overcoat a stark contrast to the earthy tones around him. The air was cool, carrying the faint perfume of roses and the sharper note of impending rain. The garden, with its precise rows of chrysanthemums and clipped hedges, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the scrutiny of the small man with the egg-shaped head and piercing green eyes. Inspector Japp, ever the faithful shadow, lingered near the iron gate, his expression a blend of skepticism and hope as he watched Poirot pace the gravel path. "Poirot, you've been over this garden a dozen times," Japp said, his voice tinged with exasperation. "What do you expect to find that my men haven't? The place is clean, no footprints, no dropped handkerchiefs, no secret passages, just flowers and a dead man." Poirot's moustache twitched, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Mon ami, you see the garden, but you do not observe. The truth, it hides not in the obvious, but in the subtle. The crushed petal, for instance, it speaks when all else is silent." He knelt by the chrysanthemum bed where Clarence Hawthorne had met his end, his gloved fingers brushing the soft earth. The spot was marked by a faint disturbance, the soil compacted where the body had lain, but no new footprints marred the ground. Poirot's gaze fixed on the single orchid petal he had noted earlier, its delicate white form still crushed among the chrysanthemums, its edges curled as if protesting its displacement. He retrieved it from his pocket, where he had kept it safe, and held it to the fading light. "This petal, Inspector, it is not from these blooms. It comes from the greenhouse, from an orchid. How does it travel so far, unless carried by human hand?" Japp scratched his chin, his brow furrowing. "Carried. You think the killer dropped it, but that doesn't tell us how they got in or out. The gate was locked, the key in Clarence's pocket, and these walls no bodies climbing them without. A crane." Poirot rose, brushing his gloves together with a precise motion. "Precisement, mon ami. The impossibility, it is the key. The garden wishes us to believe it is impenetrable, but the petal, it betrays a secret. Let us revisit the greenhouse, where this petal was born." They crossed the garden, the gravel crunching underfoot, and entered the glass structure at its far end. The greenhouse was a world apart, its humid air thick with the scent of exotic blooms and the faint chemical temps of fertilizer. Orchids lined the shelves, their petals glowing in the dim light like jewels in a velvet case. Poirot moved among them, his eyes scanning the labels in Clarence's meticulous script, each noting a hybrid's name and date. The order was flawless, the tools polished, the pots aligned with military precision. Yet something nagged at Poirot, a sense of artifice, as if the greenhouse were a stage dressed to deceive, He paused near a stack of clay pots, where the faint scuff mark he had noticed before marked the wooden floor. Kneeling, he examined it closely, his fingers tracing the outline. The mark was slight, a mere smear of dust, but it suggested movement, hasty, perhaps, or careless. "This mark," he murmured, "it is not the work of a gardener who treasures order. It is out of place." Jap crouched beside him, squinting. "At the floor, looks like nothing to me, Poirot. A scuff from Clarence's boots, maybe, when he was potting his plants." Poirot shook his head, his expression intent. "None, Inspector. Clarence Hawthorne was a man of method, of precision. He would not leave such a mark in his sanctuary. This, it is the trace of another." He moved the pots aside, revealing the bare wooden floor beneath. It was clean, polished to a shine, but Poirot's eyes narrowed as he tapped his cane against the boards. The sound was solid, unyielding, yet he lingered, as if listening for a note that was not there. "The greenhouse, it is too perfect," he said softly. "It hides something, but what?" Jap stood, his patience wearing thin. "You're chasing ghosts again, Poirot. My men checked this place, nothing but plants and dirt. If there's a clue here, it's buried deeper than I can dig." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Then we must dig with the mind, mon ami. The petal, the scuff mark, they are whispers of the truth. Let us return to the chrysanthemum bed to see what else." The garden whispers. They retraced their steps to the bed, where the evening shadows now stretched long across the gravel. Poirot knelt again, his eyes scanning the soil with the intensity of a scholar deciphering an ancient text. The chrysanthemums stood in neat rows, their blooms unmarred, save for the spot where the orchid petal had lain. He examined the surrounding plants, noting their precise arrangement, the absence of broken stems or trampled leaves. "The garden, it is like a canvas," he mused. "Every stroke is deliberate, yet this petal, it is a flaw in the painting." Jap shifted, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You keep harping on that petal, Poirot. Suppose it was dropped by the killer, what does it prove? Clara Vance was in the greenhouse that morning. Maybe it stuck to her shoe." Poirot's head tilted, considering the suggestion. Possible, but unlikely. Mademoiselle Vance is careful, a scientist. She would not carry a petal so carelessly. Nan, this was dropped in haste, perhaps in flight. The killer, they were in the greenhouse, but how did they enter the garden? Jap threw up his hands. "That's the rub, isn't it? The gate was locked, the walls too high, and we've found no secret doors. I'm starting to think Clarence stabbed himself, though that's madness." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of excitement in their depths. "Madness, mon ami, or genius? The locked garden, it is a puzzle designed to confound, but Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily confounded. The petal, the scuff mark, they point to the greenhouse, and the greenhouse, it points to the truth." As they left the garden, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering softly on the gravel. Poirot paused at the gate, his gaze lingering on the sundial, its shadow now lost in the gathering dusk. "The garden, it keeps its secrets well," he said, almost to himself. "But tomorrow, Inspector, we shall return, and I shall listen more closely. The truth, it is like the rain, it falls, whether we wish it or not." Back at the manor, Poirot retired to his room, where he spread his notes across a small desk. The orchid petal lay beside them, a fragile clue in a case of iron and stone. He thought of Clara's stained hands, Greaves' anger, Rupert's impatience, Eleanor's icy reserve. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the garden itself was the board on which the game was played. Somewhere, in its soil or shadows, lay the answer, and Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, piecing together the pattern that would unlock the mystery of the locked garden. Chapter 8. The hidden path. A night had wrapped Rosehaven Manor in a cloak of darkness. The only light, a faint glow from the windows, spilling onto the dew-soaked lawn. Hercule Poirot sat in his temporary quarters, a modest guest room with a single lamp casting a warm circle over a small mahogany desk. Before him lay a hand-drawn map of the walled garden, its precise lines tracing the flower beds, hedges, sundial, and greenhouse. The orchid petal, now pressed between two sheets of paper, rested beside it, a silent witness to the mystery. The butler's words, hidden paths, echoed in Poirot's mind, stirring his little grey cells into a frenzy of calculation. Outside, the rain had ceased, leaving a stillness that seemed to pulse with secrets. Poirot's fingers traced the map, lingering on the greenhouse. The scuff mark, the orchid petal, the locked gatel, pointed to a truth that eluded the obvious. The garden, it lies, he murmured, his voice a whisper in the quiet room. It presents itself as a fortress, but fortresses, they have their weaknesses. He rose, donning his overcoat and hat, and slipped out into the night. The manor was silent, its occupants retired, save for the faint creak of floorboards under the butler's watchful rounds. Poirot moved with the stealth of a cat, his cane silent against the grass as he approached the garden gate. The iron bars gleamed faintly under the moon, the lock unyielding. He produced a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, and entered the garden. The key borrowed from Jap turning smoothly in his gloved hand. The garden was a world of shadows, the roses and chrysanthemums reduced to silhouettes against the high walls. Poirot made his way to the greenhouse, his footsteps careful on the gravel path. Inside, the air was thick with humidity, the scent of orchids and earth enveloping him. He moved to the stack of pots where the scuff mark lay, his flashlight illuminating the wooden floor. The mark was faint, a mere suggestion of movement, but to Poirot it was a shout in the silence. He set the flashlight down, its beam angled to cast light across the floor, and retrieved a small trowel from a nearby shelf. With meticulous care, he began to dig beneath the scuff mark, the earth yielding reluctantly under his touch. After several minutes, the trowel struck something solid, not the soft thud of wood, but the hollow resonance of a different material. Poirot's heart quickened, though his expression remained composed. He cleared the soil, revealing a wooden panel, cunningly fitted to blend with the floorboards. A trapdoor, its edges seamless, its presence a secret known only to the initiated. Mon Dieu. Poirot breathed, his voice barely audible. He lifted the trapdoor, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into darkness, its walls reinforced with old timbers. The air within was cool, smelling of damp stone and forgotten years. Poirot shone his flashlight into the passage, its beam catching the glint of cobwebs and the faint tracks of recent disturbance in the dust. He did not descend, not yet. The tunnel was a revelation, but its exploration required preparation and witnesses. He replaced the trapdoor, scattering soil to conceal his discovery, and returned the pots to their place. As he stepped back into the garden, the night seemed to close around him, the walls looming higher in the moonlight. The locked garden, it is not so locked, he murmured, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. At dawn, Poirot summoned Jap to the greenhouse, the inspector rubbing sleep from his eyes as he joined him. The garden was bathed in a soft grey light, the mist curling around the hedges like a living thing. Poirot led Japp to the trapdoor, revealing it with a flourish. "Behold, mon ami, the hidden path. This is how the murderer entered and left, unseen by all." Japp's jaw dropped, his skepticism giving way to astonishment. A tunnel under the garden. How in blazes did you know? Poirot's moustache twitched. The little grey cells, Inspector. The orchid petal, the scuff mark, the butler's words of hidden paths. They pointed to a secret older than this crime. This tunnel, it is a relic, perhaps from smugglers or wartime, known only to a few. Japp peered into the passage, his flashlight illuminating the narrow descent. Where does it lead? Poirot gestured toward the wall. Beyond, I suspect, to the grounds outside the manor. Come, let us explore. They descended, Japp leading with his flashlight, Poirot following with careful steps. The tunnel was cramped, its timbers creaking. Underfoot, but it was sound. Leading beneath the garden wall to emerge in a copse of trees some 50 yards from the manor's boundary. The exit was concealed beneath a tangle of brambles, the earth disturbed as if recently trodden. Japp whistled softly. "Well, I'll be damned. This changes everything, Poirot. Anyone could have used this to get in and out. No need for keys. Or climbing." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the copse. "We, but not anyone, Inspector. The tunnel, it is a family secret, known to those who dwell in Rosehaven's shadow." The butler spoke of Clarence's mutterings, old sins, hidden paths. This was no chance discovery by an outsider. Japp's face hardened. "You're thinking Rupert, aren't you? He's got the motive inheritance, selling the estate, and he's slippery enough to pull it off." Poirot's smile was cautious. "Perhaps, mon ami, but we must not leap." 2 conclusions. The tunnel, it opens the garden, but it does not name the hand that held the knife. We must question the household again with this new knowledge. They returned to the manor, the morning now brightening, the mist lifting to reveal the garden's pristine order. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the threads. The petal, dropped in haste. The scuff mark, a sign of secrecy. The tunnel, a path to betrayal. The garden was no longer a fortress but a stage, and the players, Eleanor, Rupert, Clara, Grievage had a role yet to be fully revealed. As they reached the manor, Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the painting in the drawing room, its depiction of the garden now tinged with new meaning. The walls in the painting were lower, the ivy thicker, but the sundial stood unchanged, a silent witness to decades of secrets. "The past, it speaks," Poirot murmured. "And Hercule Poirot, he listens." Chapter 9. The family secrets. The morning sun pierced the lingering mist over Rosehaven Manor, casting a golden glow across the drawing room where Hercule Poirot had assembled the household. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and the faint musk of old roses, a reminder of the garden that lay at the heart of the mystery. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small, precise figure commanding the room despite its grandeur. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, surveyed the assembled suspects. Eleanor Hawthorne, her face a mask of icy composure. Rupert, her son, whose feigned nonchalance could not hide the nervous twitch of his fingers. Clara Vance, clutching her notebook like a shield. And Thomas Grieve, his florid cheeks flushed with impatience. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook open, his expression one of grim anticipation. Poirot clasped his hands behind him, his voice soft yet resonant. "Madame et Messieurs, the garden of Rosehaven, It has yielded a secret, a tunnel hidden beneath the greenhouse, leading beyond the walls. This, it explains how a murderer entered and left a locked sanctuary, leaving no trace but a single orchid petal. I ask you now, who among you knew of this hidden path? A ripple of shock passed through the room, like a stone dropped into still water. Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap, her knuckles whitening against the black silk of her dress. A tunnel, she said, her voice sharp as a shard of glass. Preposterous. I've lived in this house for decades, Mr. Poirot, and I've never heard of such a thing. Rupert's eyes darted to his mother, his cigarette pausing halfway to his lips. A tunnel, that's absurd. Why would there be a tunnel under the garden? Sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze unyielding. Absurd, Monsieur Rupert. Yet it exists, concealed beneath the greenhouse, a passage from another time. Perhaps a relic of smuggling, or of war, known to those who hold the secrets of Rosehaven. You, who stand to inherit this estate, did you never hear your uncle speak of such a thing? Rupert's face reddened, his bravado crumbling. I told you, I was in London. I don't know anything about tunnels, or gardens, or any of this. Nonsense. Mother, tell him. Eleanor's lips thinned, but her voice remained steady. My son speaks the truth, Mr. Poirot. Clarence was a secretive man, but he never mentioned a tunnel. If such a thing exists, it was his secret, not ours. Poirot turned to Clara, whose fingers gripped her notebook tightly, her eyes wide with something that might have been fear or surprise. Mademoiselle Vance, you spent hours in that greenhouse, studying the orchids. Did you never notice a trap door, a disturbance in the floor? Clara shook her head, her voice low but firm. Never, Mr. Poirot. Clarence was meticulous. He kept the greenhouse spotless. If there was a trap door, he hid it well, even from me. Grieve snorted, his arms crossed over his broad chest. This is a waste of time. Tunnels, petals. Next, ghosts. I told you, I was in my garden all morning. I don't know anything about Clarence's secrets, and I don't care to. Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. Yet secrets, Monsieur Grieve, they have a way of finding the light. Someone used this tunnel to enter the garden, to strike Monsieur Hawthorne, and to leave, locking the gate behind them. This was no stranger's work. It required knowledge, intimacy with the manor's past. He paced slowly before the fireplace, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm. The butler, Monsieur Perkins, spoke of Clarence's mutterings, old sins, hidden paths. These words, they suggest a history, a burden carried by this family. Madame Hawthorne, you were the wife of Clarence's brother, Edward. Did he ever speak of such a path, built perhaps in darker times? Eleanor's eyes flickered, a shadow passing across her composed features. Edward and Clarence were close. Mr. Poirot, but they kept their own counsel. If there was a tunnel, Edward never mentioned it to me. After his death, Clarence became obsessed with the garden, as if it were his penance. I thought it merely his eccentricity. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Penance, madame. For what? Eleanor hesitated, her hands trembling slightly before she clasped them tighter. I don't know. Clarence was a private man. He spoke little of the past, only of his flowers. Poirot turned to the door, where Perkins had entered silently. Summoned by a discreet gesture, the butler's lined face was pale, his sharp eyes wary as he stood at attention. Monsieur Perkins, Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing. You served this family for many years. You heard Monsieur Clarence speak of hidden paths. Did you know of this tunnel? Perkins's shoulders sagged, as if a weight had settled upon him. I suspected, sir, he admitted, his voice low. Years ago, when Mr. Edward was alive, there were rumors of a passage built during the war, for smuggling or hiding supplies. Mr. Clarence found it, I think, after Mr. Edward's death. He never spoke of it openly, but he'd go to the greenhouse at odd hours, muttering about keeping things buried. I thought it was just his way, sir, his grief. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of triumph in their depths. Grief or guilt? And who else knew of this tunnel? Monsieur Perkins? The family, perhaps? Perkins glanced at Eleanor, then Rupert, his expression uneasy. I can't say for certain, sir. Mr. Clarence was careful, but families, they talk. I reckon Mrs. Hawthorne and Master Rupert might have heard whispers, though they never said as much. Eleanor's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold. That's enough, Perkins. You overstep. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. Nan, madame, he speaks the truth, and the truth, it is what I seek. The tunnel, it was a family secret. Known to Clarence, perhaps to Edward, and possibly to others in this house. It allowed the murderer to enter, to kill, and to leave, creating the illusion of an impossible crime. Rupert leaped to his feet, his cigarette falling to the rug. This is outrageous. You're accusing us, mother and me, of knowing about some secret passage and using it to kill Uncle Clarence. I was in London, I tell you. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. The train, it is swift, monsieur, but a motor car is swifter. Your alibi, it holds for noon, but the morning, it is less certain. And you, madame, you protect your son with a fierceness that suggests more than maternal love, perhaps, a fear of what he might have done. Eleanor's face paled, but her voice was steady. My son is innocent, Mr. Poirot. You have no proof, only theories. Clara interjected, her voice trembling. Mr. Poirot, I swear I knew nothing of a tunnel. If Clarence hid it, he hid it. From me too. I only wanted to study his orchids, not this. Grieve muttered under his breath. Waste of time, all of it. You're chasing shadows, Poirot. Poirot's smile was serene, but his eyes burned with purpose. Shadows, Monsieur Grieve? Nan, I chase the light of truth. The tunnel, it changes the game. The murderer, they knew of this path, and they used it with cunning. But they left to trace the orchid petal, dropped in haste, linking the greenhouse. To the crime, he turned to Jap, who had been listening intently, his pencil poised. Inspector, we must search the tunnel again for signs of passage fibers, footprints, anything that betrays the killer's presence. And we must question the village once more, to see who moved through that copse of trees beyond the wall. Jap nodded, his expression grim. Right, Poirot. I'll have my men comb the tunnel and check the village. But this family's secret business, it points straight at Rupert, doesn't it? He's got the motive, and now we've got the means. Poirot's, the voice was measured. Motive and means. But we must have proof, mon ami. The little grey cells, they tell me there is more to this story, a thread yet to be pulled. As the group dispersed, Eleanor's gaze lingered on Poirot, a mixture of defiance and fear in her eyes. Rupert stormed out, muttering about lawyers, while Clara retreated to her notebook, her hands shaking. Grieve left with a grunt, his impatience palpable. Poirot remained by the fireplace, his eyes drawn once more to the painting of the garden, its faded colors hinting at a past that refused to stay buried. Old sins, he murmured, his fingers brushing the map in his pocket. The tunnel, it is a path to the past, and the past, it will name the killer. Chapter 10. The alibi unraveled. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Rosehaven Manor's library, casting a soft glow over the shelves of leather-bound books and the polished oak table where Hercule Poirot stood, his small figure a study in precision. His gloved hands rested on a map of the garden, now annotated with the tunnel's path, a sinuous line snaking from the greenhouse to the copse beyond the wall. The discovery of the hidden passage had shattered the illusion of the locked garden, and Poirot's green eyes gleamed with the quiet triumph of a man who had peeled back one layer of deception to reveal another. Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of a case that refused to yield, paced near the window, his notebook clutched like a lifeline. Poirot. "This tunnel's a game-changer," Japp said, his voice rough with fatigue. "It means anyone, with knowledge of it, could have slipped in, done the deed, and slipped out, all while the gate stayed locked. But it's got to be someone close to the family Ruperts, looking guiltier by the minute." Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression serene yet probing. "Oui, mon ami, the tunnel opens the garden, but it does not yet name the hand that held the knife. We must unravel the alibis, for they are like threads in a tapestry. Pull one, and the pattern shifts." He turned to the door as Mr. Perkins, the butler, entered with a tray of tea, his lined face pale but composed. Poirot had requested the household's presence, and one by one they filed in. Eleanor Hawthorne, her black dress a stark contrast to her ashen face. Rupert, his lanky frame tense, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Clara Vance, clutching her notebook, her fingers stained with the green of her trade. And Thomas Grieve, his scowl deeper than ever, his broad hands clenched into fists. Poirot stepped forward, his cane tapping lightly on the floor. "Madame et messieurs, the mystery of the locked garden is no longer so locked. A tunnel, hidden beneath the greenhouse, allowed the murderer to enter and leave, leaving only a crushed orchid petal as their trace. This tunnel, it is a family secret known to few. I ask you now, whose hand betrayed Monsieur Clarence Hawthorne?" Eleanor's voice was icy, cutting through the tension. "This is absurd, Mr. Poirot. You accuse us without evidence. My son was in London, as I've told you, and I knew nothing of this tunnel. If it exists, it was Clarence's secret, not ours." Rupert nodded vigorously, his cigarette unlit, trembling in his fingers. "Exactly. I was at my club meeting. My solicitor. Mother telephoned me at noon. You can check the records. I couldn't have been here." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, his voice soft but piercing. "Monsieur Rupert, your alibi, it is like a Swiss clock, precise, but only for the hours it covers. The train to London, it departs at 8, oui, and your meeting, it was at 10. A motor car, driven with haste, could return you to Ashford by 11, through the tunnel, to confront your uncle. The estate, it is a heavy burden, Nan, and with Clarence gone, it is yours to sell." Rupert's face flushed, his voice rising. "That's preposterous. I didn't even know about the tunnel. And why would I kill him? I'd get the money eventually, anyway." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Eventually, monsieur, is a long time for a man in debt. The village speaks of Rosehaven's troubles, of loans unpaid, of your impatience to sell. Clarence, he opposed this, did he not?" Eleanor interjected, her tone sharp. My son is no murderer, Mr. Poirot. You have no proof, only conjecture. Turned to Clara, whose hands tightened around her notebook. Mademoiselle Vance, you were in the greenhouse that morning, studying the orchids. You saw nothing unusual, no sign of this trapdoor, even as you worked so closely with Monsieur Hawthorne. Clara's eyes flickered, her voice steady but strained. I told you, Mr. Poirot, I saw nothing. Clarence was alive when I left at 11, locking the gate behind me. If there was a tunnel, he never mentioned it, and I never noticed it. Poirot's gaze lingered on her stained fingers, the green mingling with ink. And yet, mademoiselle, the orchid petal was found by the chrysanthemum bed, far from the greenhouse. A petal does not walk, Nan. It was carried, perhaps by one who moved in haste. Clara's cheeks paled, but she held his gaze. I didn't carry it, Mr. Poirot. I swear it. Grieve snorted, his arms crossed. This is all nonsense. Tunnels, petals, your spinning tales, Poirot. I was in my garden, as I said, and I've got witnesses. You're barking up the wrong tree. Poirot's smile was faint, almost serene. The tree, Monsieur Grieve, it has many branches. But the truth, it grows from a single root. The tunnel, it was known to the family, perhaps to others. Monsieur Perkins, you spoke of Clarence's mutterings, old sins, hidden paths. Did he ever name those who shared this secret? The butler, standing silently by the door, shifted uneasily. He never named names, sir, but he spoke as if the past weighed on him. The tunnel, I reckon, was something Mr. Edward and he knew about, maybe others in the family. After Mr. Edward died, Mr. Clarence guarded it like a treasure, though he never said why. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A treasure or a curse? The tunnel, it links the past to the present, and the present, it points to motive. The estate, it is in debt, and Clarence, he stood in the way of its sale. This, it is a powerful reason to act. He turned to Jap, who had been scribbling notes. Inspector, your men, they have searched the tunnel. Jap nodded. Found a few scuff marks, some disturbed dust, but nothing clear, no fibers, no clear footprints. The rain didn't help, but it's recent, Poirot, no doubt about it. Someone used it, and not long ago. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Recent, and the petal, it was crushed near the body, yet it came from the greenhouse. The killer, they moved through the tunnel, entered the greenhouse, perhaps to confront Clarence, then struck him by the chrysanthemums, dropping the petal in their haste. They locked the gate to create the illusion of an impossible crime, but the tunnel, it betrays them. Rupert's voice cracked, his composure fraying. You keep pointing at me, but I wasn't here. Check the club, check the train records. I didn't know about any tunnel. Poirot's voice was calm, relentless. The records, they confirm. Your presence in London at noon, but the morning, it is a shadow. A fast car, a quiet road, the tunnel, it makes all possible. And you, monsieur, you had reason to wish your uncle gone. Eleanor stood, her voice trembling with restrained fury. Enough, Mr. Poirot. You accuse without proof. My son is innocent, and I will not have him slandered. Poirot bowed slightly, his expression unperturbed. Slander, madame. Nan, I seek only the truth, and the truth, it is close now, like a flower ready to bloom. As the group dispersed, Rupert muttering about lawyers, Clara retreating to her sketches, and Grieve storming out. Poirot lingered by the library window, his gaze fixed on the garden beyond. The tunnel had unravelled the locked garden's mystery, But the alibis, they were still a knot to untangle. Rupert's motive was clear, yet Clara's presence in the greenhouse, Greaves' proximity, Eleanor's protectiveness, all were threads in a pattern not yet fully woven. "Inspector," Poirot said, turning to Japp, "we must press harder. The tunnel, it is the path, but the petal, it is the sign. We shall question again, and this time, the truth, it will not hide." Japp sighed, closing his notebook. "You're like a dog with a bone, Poirot. All right, we'll dig deeper, but I'm betting on Rupert he's got the most to gain." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps mon ami, but the little grey cells, they whisper of more. The garden, it has one last secret to tell." Chapter 11. The confession. The drawing-room of Rosehaven Manor was steeped in a heavy silence, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire in the grate and the distant patter of rain against the windows. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small, immaculate figure radiating an authority that belied his stature. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the assembled company. Eleanor Hawthorne, her face a mask of pale defiance. Rupert, his lanky frame slumped in a chair, his hands trembling as he clutched an unlit cigarette. Clara Vance, her notebook abandoned, her stained fingers knotted in her lap. And Thomas Grieve, his florid cheeks flushed with irritation, his arms crossed tightly. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook at the ready, his expression one of grim expectation. The air was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves held their breath, awaiting the unravelling of the truth. Poirot clasped his hands behind him, his cane resting against a chair, and began in a voice soft yet commanding, "Madame et Messieurs, we stand at the heart of the mystery of the locked garden. A man is dead, stabbed in his sanctuary, and the garden, it has revealed its secreter tunnel, hidden beneath the greenhouse, a path that allowed the murderer to enter and leave unseen. The orchid petal, the scuff mark, the locked gate, these are the threads of a tapestry. And now, I, Hercule Poirot, shall weave them into the truth." Eleanor's voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold. "This is intolerable, Mr. Poirot. You've spun your theories, accused my son, and now you speak of tunnels and petals. Where is your proof?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile serene but piercing. "Proof, madame? It is here, in the garden, in the words you speak, in the silences you keep. The tunnel, it is no mere room, it exists, and it was used by the killer to enter, to strike Monsieur Clarence Hawthorne, and to escape, locking the gate to create the illusion of an impossible crime. But the petal, it betrays them, dropped in haste by the chrysanthemum bed, far from the greenhouse where it belongs." Rupert leaped to his feet, his voice cracking with desperation. "I've told you, I was in London. I didn't know about any tunnel. You're trying to pin this on me because of the estate, but I wasn't here." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, his voice calm but relentless. "Monsieur Rupert, your alibi, it is like a house of cards, impressive but fragile. The train took you to London at 8, your solicitor met you at 10, your mother telephoned at noon. But the hours between, they are unaccounted for. A motor car, driven with purpose, could bring you to Ashford by 11. The tunnel, known to your family, offered a path to your uncle, whose refusal to sell the estate stood between you and freedom from debt." Eleanor's hands clenched, her eyes blazing. "You have no evidence, Mr. Poirot. My son is innocent, and I will not have him slandered." Poirot turned to her, his expression unperturbed. "Slander, madame. Nan, I seek only the truth. The tunnel, It was a secret of the Hawthorns, built perhaps by your late husband Edward, and known to Clarence. You, who lived here all these years, can you swear you knew nothing of it?" Eleanor's lips parted, then closed, her face pulling. I heard rumors, years ago, of passages from the war, but I never saw them, never thought them real. Clarence was secretive. He kept his own counsel. Poirot nodded, his eyes flickering. To Clara, Mademoiselle Vance, you were in the greenhouse that morning, alone with Monsieur Hawthorne. You argued, He accused you of stealing his orchids, a charge you denied. Yet the petal, it was found far from the greenhouse. Carry it, perhaps unknowingly, as you left. Clara's voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. I told you, Mr. Poirot. I left at 11, and Clarence was alive. I didn't know about the tunnel, and I didn't drop any petal. I respected him, even if we disagreed. Greaves snorted, his voice rough with impatience. This is a farce. I was in my garden, as I've said, and I've got witnesses. You're wasting time with this tunnel nonsense, Poirot. Poirot's smile was faint, almost pitying. Time, Monsieur Greaves, is never wasted when it leads to the truth. The tunnel, it points to the family, to those who knew Rosehaven's secrets. And the motive, it points to inheritance, to the estate that bleeds money, to the man who would sell it if Clarence were gone. He turned back to Rupert, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Monsieur Rupert, you are young, impatient, burdened by debts. Your uncle, he stood in your way, refusing to sell the manor that could save you. The tunnel, it was your path too. Freedom, you drove from London, entered through the copse, moved through the tunnel to the greenhouse, confronted Clarence, and, in a moment of rage, struck him with his own pruning knife. You dropped the petal in your haste, locked the gate to cover your tracks, and returned to London, your alibi carefully constructed. Rupert's face drained of colour, his cigarette falling to the floor. No, you're wrong. I didn't. Couldn't Eleanor Rose, her voice a low hiss. Stop this, Mr. Poirot. You torment my son with baseless accusations. But Rupert's resolve crumbled, his shoulders slumping as he buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean to kill him, he whispered, his voice breaking. I swear it wasn't planned. I came back from London. I took the car, like you said. I knew about the tunnel. Uncle Clarence showed it to me years ago, said it was our family's secret. I went to the greenhouse to talk, to beg him to sell the estate. The debts, they're crushing us, and he wouldn't listen. He laughed, called me a fool, said the garden was worth more than money. I lost my temper. The knife was there, on the table. I grabbed it, and before I knew it, he was gone. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Rupert, no, tell me you didn't. Rupert's eyes were wet, his voice a ragged whisper. I'm sorry, Mother. I didn't mean it. I locked the gate, went back through the tunnel, drove to London. I thought no one would know. Clara's face was pale, her hands trembling, while Greaves stared, his scowl replaced by shock. Japp stepped forward, his voice steady but grim. Rupert Hawthorne, you're under arrest for the murder of Clarence Hawthorne. Come with me. As Japp clapped handcuffs on Rupert's wrists, Eleanor sank into her chair. Her composure shattered, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of horror and despair. Poirot watched in silence, his expression sombre but resolute. The truth, it is a heavy burden, madame, he said softly. But it is better known than hidden. Clara rose, her voice barely audible. I didn't know, Mr. Poirot. I thought Clarence's death was an accident, or someone else? Poirot nodded gently. You respected him, mademoiselle, but respect, it does not blind the truth. The petal, it was your innocence, but it was also his undoing. Grieve muttered, well, that's that, then. Waste of a good garden, if you ask me. Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind still turning. The garden, monsieur, it will bloom again, but first it must heal. As Japp led Rupert away, the room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of the confession settling like dust. Poirot turned to the window, where the garden lay quiet under the rain, its secrets finally laid bare. Chapter 12. The garden's peace the rain had ceased, leaving the air over Rosehaven Manor fresh and cool, with a sky of bruised grey clouds parting to reveal glimpses of pale blue. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the walled garden, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp gravel path. The chrysanthemums, vibrant despite the tragedy they had witnessed, swayed gently in the breeze, their petals untouched by the storm. The high limestone walls, once a symbol of impenetrable mystery, now seemed merely stoic, their secrets laid bare by the discovery of the hidden tunnel. The iron gate stood ajar, its lock no longer a barrier but a relic of a puzzle solved. Poirot's green eyes, sharp and reflective, traced the lines of the garden, from the precise rose beds to the sundial at its heart, its bronze face catching the fleeting sunlight. Inspector Japp approached, his heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Well, Poirot, you've done it again, he said, his voice gruff but warm. Rupert's confessed, and we've got him in custody. The tunnel, the petal, your blasted little grey sells it. All came together. I'll never understand how you do it, but I'm glad you're on our side. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. Mon ami, it is not magic, but method. The garden, it spoke, and I listened. The tunnel, it was the key. The petal, it was the sign. And the motive, it was the shadow of greed that darkened this place. Japp nodded, glancing at the chrysanthemum bed where Clarence Hawthorne had fallen. Poor old man, all he wanted was to tend his flowers, and it cost him his life. Rupert's story checks out. His solicitor confirmed the debts, and we found petrol receipts for a car he rented that morning. He drove back from London, just as you said. Poirot's gaze softened, his voice low. We, Inspector. Rupert, he was driven by desperation, by the weight of a crumbling estate. But the garden, it does not judge, it simply endures. They walked slowly toward the greenhouse, its glass panels glinting in the weak sunlight. The trap-door, now uncovered, lay open like a wound in the earth, the tunnel below a dark reminder of the past's reach into the present. Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the wooden floor. This place, it was Clarence's sanctuary, yet it became his tomb. The tunnel, a secret from another time, betrayed him, as secrets often do. Japp scratched his head, his brow furrowing. You know, Poirot, I thought Clara might have been mixed up in it, those stained hands, her time in the greenhouse, or even grieve with his temper. But you had Rupert pegged from the start, didn't you? Poirot shook his head, his expression thoughtful. Nan, mon ami, I suspected, but suspicion is not certainty. The little grey cells, they considered Clara's loyalty, Greaves' resentment, Eleanor's silence. But the petal, it pointed to the greenhouse, and the tunnel, it pointed to the family. Rupert's motive, it was the strongest thread, and his alibi, it unravelled under scrutiny. Japp chuckled, a rare sound in the sombre garden. You and your metaphors, Poirot, always talking about threads and petals. Care for a pint at the village pub. My treat, for once. Poirot's eyes twinkled, but he shook his head. Perhaps later, Inspector. First, I must restore order to my thoughts. The garden, it is at peace now, but the mind of Hercule Poirot, it requires a moment of reflection. As Jap trudged back to the manor, Poirot lingered, his gaze settling. On the sundial, its shadow stretched long across the gravel, a silent marker of time and truth. He thought of Eleanor, her fierce protection of her son now broken. Of Clara, whose passion for botany had been overshadowed by tragedy. Of Grieve, whose anger was justified but impotent. And of Clarence, whose love for his garden had been both his joy and his undoing. The garden, it is like the human heart. Poirot murmured, his voice barely audible. Full of beauty, full of secrets, but none can hide from the truth. He turned, his cane tapping a final rhythm as he left the garden, the gate swinging shut behind him with a soft clang. The chrysanthemums stood sentinel, their blooms a testament to resilience, and the walled garden, no longer locked, seemed to breathe freely at last. Poirot walked toward the manor, his mind already turning to the next puzzle. For the world, like the garden, was never without its mysteries.